Welcome to the Find the Way podcast. In this show, we will try to explore what is happening in emerging markets and how entrepreneurs, investors, and communities are simply finding the way to make phenomenal things happen, regardless how volatile the environment may sometimes seem. Today, I'm very excited to present to you Luis Barletta, all the way from Argentina, vet by trade, and he's been working as an entrepreneur for the past 20 years. And now he's the CEO and founder of Feedvax, that is going to revolutionize the way our animals are getting vaccinated and thus help the humanity and the animals at the same time. So welcome, Luis.
Well, thank you, Eric, for having me. It's a pleasure. And I'm very excited about this first podcast in English for me.
Nice. I'm super excited as well. And it was a very nice adventure for me to come and visit your facilities a few weeks ago. Very impressive over here in Buenos Aires. And it really demonstrated the hard science that you are able to provide to the world. And I think that the audience would love to hear a little intro to Feedvax and your mission. So what is Feedvax?
Well, first of all, what we're doing is a platform of oral vaccine, and we are addressing a problem of 300 billion losses in the animal farming due to infection disease and parasitic disease as well. And the thing is that currently, the industry currently have no very good alternative to treat these diseases. And today you have injectable vaccines on one side, which are very impractical since you have to have a lot of animal handling. Suppose in case of a farm of fish, you have to take the fish out of the water and sterilize them and inject one by one manually. And if you have a beef cattle farm, you have to move animals from one side to the other of the farm. You have to have special facilities and a lot of people to vaccinate animals. So that's why injectable vaccine has low penetration in the market. So the alternative for this are antibiotics, but they remain in the animal, in the flesh, and also in the environment. So that's where we can, as an oral vaccine that goes in the feed. So we claim that we are the end of animal handling. No stress,
Nice.
Zero stress for the animal, and facilitate and by farmers' lives.
How did you end up in this game and starting and founding Feedvax? What's the story behind that?
It's a long story. It's like it's easy to see how the dots are connected when you see back. But I had been an entrepreneur for all my life, and I founded my first company 20 and something years ago, and it was a .com. I'm going to be very brief on this, but during that first travel or journey, I learned a lot about user experience. So everything that we did on that website was compensate with more users and better tools. And also, I've been a veterinary consultant in Argentina, Uruguay, and Bolivia. And I visited a lot of farms in my life. And as a veterinary, I saw that there was a lack of user experience in our veterinary practices. So one of the pain points in animal farming is injectable vaccine. So I started wondering how we could eliminate all that friction. So that's where it started to come the idea of an oral vaccine. It made it stronger, where I started going deep into the biotech industry. So I was very excited about what happening in the biotech sector. So I started showing all that dots and ended up in Feedvax.
Nice. And so when exactly was Feedvax founded? How long ago?
It was in 2017. Slow motion starting because we had no money. And it took me like almost 2 years without money working with some kind of team because I was trying to build the first team. And it was very hard at that time with no money. And I was living in Neuquén, which is not Buenos Aires. It's far away from Buenos Aires. So I had to travel a lot and try to conquer the first team. Part we did in a remotely way. And then by the end of 2018, we got some fund from Grid Exponential.
Nice. And you mentioned that you basically bootstrapped for the first 2 years of existence, and that made the whole progress slower. Why do you think that it took that long of a period of time to raise funds?
Yeah, and first of all, because it was a little bit weird for the industry or for a very early stage ecosystem that we had at that time. That one were teaching on how to build an oral vaccine without anything else than the idea. So, but I was so convinced that I was able to reach the oral vaccine that this conviction was the that drove me to form this first team, which then I convinced the Greek exponential team to that I was the one. So it was tough, and there were no much alternatives at that moment. So it was very hard for a biotech startup at that moment to fundraise. There were no much alternative. Today you have more alternatives, but at that time it was very hard.
Are you talking about the funding environment in Argentina or in Latam?
No, no.
Where are you referencing
at
with
the
that?
time was we were looking for money only in Argentina.
Yeah.
After that, in 2019, we started looking for funds all over the world, and we succeed.
Yeah, and how are you now funded? Is it mainly from Argentina, or does it come from other countries as well?
Other countries as well. We became
from which countries?
Well, more international because in 2019 we were selected for the Hatch Blue Accelerator Program, which is very specific for aquaculture startups. So we have been there. We have been in a 4-month trip around the world from Hawaii, Norway, and Singapore. And then we had funds for Conservation International, and then for a family office of London, which is Ponderosa Ventures. And nowadays we are speaking with the best probably funds for the animal farming industry.
Yeah. And when you have raised money, where are you raising that money into? Is it coming into Argentina? Just as an example for the audience that comes out of Argentina, is that how are you raising the money, in what currency, into what entities?
Again, what currently what we do, and probably 90-something% of the startups do, is to build an entity in United States. We incorporate ourselves in Hawaii, in particular in Hawaii, because it was an ask from Hatch before investing in Feedvax, and they invest in that company. And we have a relationship between that company. The one from the United States is the owner of the local company, the Argentinian company.
And Why is it set up this way? You mentioned that most of the Argentine firms are doing it this way, that they set up entities outside of
Yeah,
Argentina.
because
Can you elaborate a
yeah,
little bit?
I guess I don't know if it happens to the other startups around the world, but it happens to most of the startups around the world because I know that it happens the same thing probably in Brazil, the ones that I know. I could guess that it's because they are more afraid of what can happen to an investment in Argentina. We have a long story of defaults and problem with the bank's accounts and so on. And probably it's the way that they feel more confident that the investment is safer.
Yeah. But still, somehow, there is a tremendous amount of talent, tremendous amount of entrepreneurs and companies coming out of this region and finding the way for regional and global success. What is the secret sauce, if there is any, in a way that, for instance, that you have witnessed in the past 20 years as an Argentine entrepreneur and operating with an extreme volatility that, for instance, us in Europe, we have never experienced, at least in our past 30-year lifetimes, this type of volatility that is a very norm for many countries here in this region.
Yeah, it's interesting what it happened in Argentina. We have a lot of unicorns, and if you compare to the population, probably it's one of the top five. Where with countries like Israel, that probably is one of those who has as much unicorns in terms of population as Argentina have. And I guess that probably is because we live in a roller coaster, and we get used to this roller coaster, and we have to become good at rolling coasting. The fact of being used to this all-time changing in the business environment is that you become more agile and more awake to changes. And one of the things that you have to have as a skill when you lead startups is that you have to be very awake and very, very fast to move and make new ways of focus or ways to solve problems, because you are always iterating. So at the end, is something that becomes very familiar for an Argentinian.
And on that note, you have relatively complex operations when you're operating in the biotech scene. It's not an easy and fast launchable SaaS that you're providing. How are you trying to mitigate any type of volatility that might come out of being operating in Argentina in terms of production, in terms of delivering your products and services? How are you trying to mitigate the external volatility that comes out of from the fact that political and economical institutions are relatively volatile?
Well, first of all, we fix or we build Feedvax in a way that trying to avoid all that things that can affect the most feedbacks. So on one side, our production and scale up, we will do it outside of Argentina. And what we have in Argentina is our research. In this way, this volatility it doesn't affect us that much. So this is a way of trying to get the best things of Argentina, which is probably our R&D team. We have an incredible R&D team, and our first market will be Brazil. We won't be operating commercially in Argentina, at least at the beginning.
So you have then, if I sum it up, you have an entity in Hawaii where you have received funds that you allocate then into Argentina, where you have your R&D team, and then you have
Another entity.
Operations in Brazil.
We will have operation in Brazil because we are just starting there, and we already have an entity in Brazil, Feedvax Brazil. We already have that entity, and we are making all the paperwork to that entity belongs to the one in Hawaii as well.
Okay, very clear. And are you able to elaborate for the people outside of Argentina, in a lot of cases also outside of Latam, is that what is the rationale behind of having only the R&D team in Argentina and then the other, let's say, operational entity in Brazil?
Well, the reason is first is because we have very good resource in Argentina, human resource, very talented people. The research in Argentina is very good. Just for the audience, Argentina had 3 Nobel Prize in science, and it's the only one in the South Hemisphere who has Nobel Prizes in Nobel Prize in science. So not only that, the other reason is because it's cheap, because we are cheap. If you compare to, I don't know, anyone in Europe or United States. And we have very good places to do research as well. What we don't have is the startup ecosystem of probably money and VCs and so on that probably you will have in Europe or North America. But nowadays it's easier being global and pitching on a video call.
Yeah. You mentioned there about the ecosystem differences between, let's say, Argentina, North America, and Europe. How have you witnessed that to change throughout your entrepreneurial career here in Argentina during the past plus 20 years? What has changed in your eyes along the way?
Yeah, well, I witnessed all that all that 20 years because I've been entrepreneur through all that time. Well, it has changed. And what it has changed the most when I saw that the biggest change was during the last government from Macri, where we start seeing more and more programs for startups. And even though nowadays economy is not going very well, I would say that we have seen more VCs in the last 4 years than any. It happened at the same time. It's the same thing that it is happening all over the world. We have seen more money coming to the VCs, to the private capital, to venture capital. And it's the same thing that's happening in Latin America and in particular in Argentina.
And why do you think that there is now this larger inflow of capital coming into this region?
Oh, you mean why?
Why?
Well,
yeah. Why do you think that that's now is coming more and more?
I guess it's because we have a very good opportunities. For me, it's one of the biggest opportunities that you can have in Argentina. It's even bigger than the agriculture, oil, the oil and gas, and so on. It's even bigger.
And why is that?
Because as I said at the beginning, we have a very talented people, and we are cheap in terms of global comparison. Cheap in a good way. In a good way.
Cheap in a good way. If we take a look on your take on impact, and when we scroll through your website and Feedvax mission, it becomes very clear is that you have impact and you're very driven on that. And you specifically mentioned that you do not choose between sustainability and efficiency, that you go for it all. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's it's good to mention, but because sometimes you have to choose between size. And I really love the idea that today, with all the science and all the tools that you have available, you can do it. We can go for all. I mean, we want to have something which will be more sustainable, more effective, and at the same time, more simple to apply for the farmer. And really mean it, because I've been a farmer myself. One of the things that probably we didn't talk about, but I've been a farmer for more than 10 years. And I suffer a lot of things by my own. So I want to do it. And I had this strong belief that we have to do it and go for all.
Yeah. And there, again, if we focus on the efficiency side, that how currently animal vaccines are being injected and how that process works, why is it done in a way that it is done in today's world? And why is it the fact that you're the first one that is actually feeding these animals?
Feeding a vaccine.
What's the story behind that?
I guess that's one of the things that the industry find a way to do injectable vaccine, because it's easier to achieve an injectable vaccine than an oral vaccine. And we made some injectable vaccines in order to test some part of the vaccine. We do some injections in order to try different antigens or boosters and so on. And we had the first proof of concept with injectable vaccine like 2 years and something ago. So it was something that we did in a very straight way and very fast. So probably that was what the history of the injectable vaccines or the vaccines started. And I always imagine that someone on the laboratory called the marketing guy from the first veterinary pharmaceutical companies and say to the marketing guy, this is an injectable vaccine. You have to use it this way. So go to the farms and convince them that they have to do this. And now I feel that I am the farmer and call the marketing guy and say, hey, go to the lab and say to the researchers, we need a vaccine that works like this. So this is like the revenge.
Yeah, makes sense. And is it really still happening in the world that if we are providing vaccines to fish, that you need to inject the vaccine one by one, literally to those fish? And even in some cases, if machinery is not being used, you need to do it by hand.
Yeah, you have machines in salmon farming industry. You have some. They're very expensive. And in the tilapia, which is the second largest veterinary farm fish in the world after salmon, they do it manually. And they just starting with machines.
Wow. So it takes a long time to do that.
Yeah, that's why we started in agriculture, because it doesn't make any sense to do that. The pain is harder than any other animal farm.
And if we look at it then a little bit deeper in your innovative solution, and we focus more on the impact side on that, again, how are you contributing to the fact that you're providing positive environmental impact? What do you mean by that?
Well, we're going to start it by saying that we will replace the use of antibiotics. It's one of the things that I start saying at the beginning, because in the animal farming, they use a lot of antibiotics, and aquaculture is one of the sectors that use the most. And the reason is because antibiotics are very easy to use, and you can add it to the feed as our oral vaccine. So the fact of delivering an oral vaccine that will be even easier to use than the antibiotics, we're going to replace them. without any side effects for the consumer and environment. That's in one side, and probably it's the moment to talk about what we are doing also with Vet Kiosk, which is the other project that we have, which is for terrestrial animals. And this is a smart feeder that will feed our oral vaccine in a more precise way, because this smart feeder will be supplying our oral vaccine, and also we'll be able to feed all other product like parasitic. So with this, we will avoid all kind of resistance to antibiotics and antiparasitic as well, because with this device, you will be able to program the scheme of the vaccination without the need of remember where and when you have to do the second dose or third dose of the vaccine.
So then the technology will guide the animals as well as their carekeepers, so to speak, automatically. Okay. And with this process, if you could elaborate a little bit more, I think that a lot of people in the audience might not know what does that mean. So you have certain animals that would just walk into their feeding stations, and while they get their daily nutrition, so to speak, then at the same time,
how
is that process?
We find out that the oral vaccine was something that it would ease the farmer's routine. But for the rest of the animals, we start seeing that there was even that we can took a step further and build this robot, which is a smart feeder that recognizes each individual by its tag, which is a regular tag with a chip. And when this animal goes to his daily supplementation, he will, if required that day and that moment, got the oral vaccine or other supplement like Evo or antiparasitic that this animal could require. Of course, it's something that you do in a remotely way that you can manage that with an app, and you plan everything from the app. And of course, you have to supply the feeder with the proper supplement or medicine or drug.
Yeah.
And this Vet Kiosk will be available this year commercially.
Nice. And the technology clearly is being developed in good hands with a very knowledgeable team. If we look outside of the technological and regulatory challenges that will inevitably come as they come, what type of other scaling challenges do you see in your, let's say, 2 to 3 year future, commercially speaking?
As you said, first could be regulatory timing. It could take, one vaccine can take as few as 6 months up to 2 years, and that is a risk. And also the adoption curve of the technology, both of them, any of the oral vaccines and the device, the Vet Kiosk, both is a risk as well. And also, but less risky, I would say, is the dependence of money that we still have. But I guess those are the most challenging aspects today, or risk today.
And is there any, in addition to that, is there any, or do you see this as a challenge or an issue as an Argentine entrepreneur? Is that when you go for a further scaling phase, when you found your product market fit and the regulatory challenges have been overcome, do you find that there is enough talent within Argentina to enable global scaling, or how's that talent pool that you mentioned earlier, that there's phenomenal talent over here, but is that talent also applicable for scaling high growth companies?
I guess that I guess not. We are already hiring overseas talent or foreign. I don't know if the expression of overseas is applied with someone from Brazil or from the United States, but
It's a good word to say.
yes, we are planning that, and we already doing. And because at the end, if you want to be global and you want to be competitive, you have to have the best talent in the world. So yes,
Yeah.
but we have to have money enough. So we have to run a new round in order to hire more expensive resources, human resources.
Yeah. And on that note, you mentioned that the ecosystem has gotten better over here in Argentina in the last years. More money is being injected into the ecosystem. But is it still applicable that local funds are able to provide a good amount of funding for the subsequent rounds for scaling, or are they mainly targeted for pre-seed and seed stage?
Yeah, most of the
rounds?
funds here are pre-seed and seed, and it start to be less fluid for Series A and so on. And it's the opposite when you go global. So we have been struggling to have smaller checks because somehow we don't want to dilute ourselves today. So we are making bridge rounds. So today is harder to get a bridge round if you go global, and it's easier if you start local.
And why do you think that it's harder when you mention going global?
Because they do bigger checks, bigger, over $1 million, most of the funds. Even though that they say they do seed rounds, even though they do seed rounds, seed rounds are bigger than what we have here.
And what is it typically here?
Yeah, I guess it's something between 100 and 500 thousand dollars. And if you're looking for a Series A outside of Argentina, you have to think from 3 to 10 million.
Over there, you mentioned that you're, as anywhere in the world, you need to raise more funds to be able to hire better people into your team, more skilled people. How is the payroll environment within Argentina? Are you paying in the local currency that has almost 3-digit inflation, or how is that operating environment for you?
We pay what we pay today is probably would be different from it would be an agreement that we could do with someone from a foreign employee or consultant. What we are doing today is paying for those people. We pay in dollars always.
In US dollars. And that's like, is that a prerequisite for any talent to join the team that you're facing?
Someone who is foreign, yes.
Then I would just, as a final theme, to go into a topic of, in your opinion, should people move to Argentina, work within tech, work within the startups? What's your take on that?
I guess it's a good journey to take. I will recommend to come to Argentina to do the experience of live here and enjoy what Argentina have to give you. But if you want to have the exercise or somehow we can call the ability of an Argentinian to adapt to different environment, I would recommend you to adopt an Argentinian into your team because it could be easier than you to adapt to Argentina economy, or because it's going to take a lot of time, because it's even hard for us who has born in Argentina to understand Argentina. So I would recommend you, or anyone who wants that ability, to get someone from Argentina.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Luis, for today and going through some parts of your journey and how you see the entrepreneurial life in Argentina. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the podcast.